So, good morning, everybody, and once again, good day from Australia. It gives me pleasure to be able to talk to people about effective stakeholder engagement because it's my mission to change the world one stakeholder at a time, and I'm hoping through this webinar that I can reach even more people. So what I wanted to talk about today was how through effective engagement of stakeholders, organisations and projects can be more regularly more successful. Now, there's a major connection between successful organisations and projects and stakeholders, and that's supported by research that has been conducted over many years, because obviously in the world of projects, this is one question that everybody is interested in trying to find answers to: how to prevent projects from failing, or how to work to make projects more successful, and therefore organisations. And so more and more research is indicating that there is at least one thing in common with successful projects and successful organisations, and that is that they know who their stakeholders are, they know who their important stakeholders are, and through effective communication, they're able to build strong relationships with those stakeholders so that the stakeholders and the team themselves can work together for success of the project or organisation. And this is stakeholder engagement. So when thinking about preparing for this presentation, I thought, what are the things that we really need to consider when engaging stakeholders? And I think that these 10 steps cover that quite well. So the first thing is you have to be clear on the work that you're doing, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. You need to also recognise that you need to look widely for your stakeholder community. It's not enough just to focus on customers or shareholders, because there are so many other stakeholders who can be supportive of the work you do as well. Recognising also in step 3 that you may have identified a lot of stakeholders, and so you need to be clear on who to focus on most for success of your project, while still recognising that you can't ignore all of the other stakeholders. And with those important stakeholders in particular, but also with others, you need to understand what they want to gain as a result of being involved in the success of this work. Building the relationship is the way that that's going to happen, a two-way activity where the needs of the project or the organisation are considered, but also the expectations of the stakeholders. And once those two parts of the relationship are considered, it will be strong and robust. But of course, no relationship can prosper without maintenance, and that's what communication does. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the importance of communication and developing a good communication plan. One thing to plan communication, another to implement the communication plan, and even more importantly, and I'll discuss this in step 8, how do you know when you're being effective? How do you know that your communication is working? And then, of course, I wanted to also talk about investing in credibility and how to continue to improve the processes for effective stakeholder engagement. So let us begin. So what is the work? So many people have a list of stakeholders, and they use this all the time to consider who the stakeholders might be at any time in the project. And that's a useful starting point. But it's also really important, as you would do for any work within an organisation or any project, you need to be clear on what it is you're working on. What is the scope of this work? What are the objectives? And by understanding that, you're able to be very clear on, for this work, who are the stakeholders, who are the important stakeholders, and what messages do I have to share with them? What information do I have to share with them for success? So the work can be not just projects. It can be anything within an organisation where a number of people need to work together for a successful outcome, where objectives are known, where you're able to measure success one way or another. So it can be projects and programs, of course, but mergers and acquisitions, there's a very clear need to understand who your stakeholders are. Any change that occurs, one way to modify resistance and make sure that the change actually does work successfully is to be clear on who are the people that will be affected, who are the people that need extra information, who are the people that need to be involved. Competitor analysis, one of my very large client organisations was interested in understanding not only who their competitors were, but in some cases they had to work with these competitors in partnering arrangements. How would you understand how best to communicate effectively in those situations? Or preparing for bids or marketing campaigns or political campaigns, and any other sort of consultation as well. So the stakeholders are a major factor of life in any organisation, in any of the work that it needs to undertake. So why do you have to be clear about what your work is? Because this is the only way really to understand who are your important stakeholders right now and how to understand that stakeholder community. You need to be clear on the boundaries of the work, what's actually being done, or what's not being done. So if part of the work is going to have clear boundaries, for stakeholders who may think that they have input into work that's not part of the boundaries at that stage, those stakeholders don't necessarily have to be treated as important stakeholders. What are the objectives of the work? Who's going to benefit? Obviously, that's going to tell you very clearly who some of your stakeholders will be. And then also who's going to be affected by the work or its outcomes. So many team leaders, project managers or other sorts of managers sometimes forget to think beyond what they think the boundaries of their work are. And so it is important always to consider who is going to be affected by the outcomes of the work as well, because often they're the ones who will have a major say on whether or not this work has been successful or not. We recognise that we now understand the boundaries of the work we have to do. How would we go about understanding who our stakeholders are? So one of the things I've encountered time and time again in my work in organisations is that many organisations have a very clear view and probably constricted view of who their stakeholders are. Some just focus on their customers, some just focus on their senior managers and consider them the most important. Many large corporations consider that their shareholders are the most important stakeholders. And I think we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years what can happen to organisations when shareholder value is the most important driver for running a business. So it's important to be very clear that you need to range widely to understand who your stakeholders are. Yes, it may be one of these projects where you may be able to consider that the whole world is your stakeholder group. But of course, what you need to do then is start to identify groups of stakeholders or start to identify who are the important ones for you at that particular time. Who is a stakeholder? So I actually took my definition originally from the work of Freeman in 1986, who is still one of the major gurus when it comes to modern thought and modern research about stakeholders. But of course, this is very similar to the one that's now in the PMBOK in the edition 5, 2012. And so I think this is probably the best definition of stakeholders that I've ever seen. A stakeholder is a group or an individual who can affect or be affected by the work or outcomes of a project or organisation, or, most importantly, perceive this to be the case, because often it's stakeholders who think they have a stake will be the ones who are disappointed when they don't get what they think they need or don't, or nobody understands that what they need and does their best to communicate.